Before my grandmother's death, I had a dream as if I were at my parents' house, where other relatives were also present. But for some reason, I didn't want to stay there and was in a hurry to get back home. My nephew, with tears in his eyes, was begging me to stay, explaining that exactly at 1 a.m., Charlie, my uncle who passed away 7 years ago, was supposed to arrive. I really wanted to see him, but some force was pulling me home. I also remember my mom holding 2 roses in her hands. I woke up feeling cold even though it was warm in the apartment. There was a strong sense of anxiety and a bad premonition. I was lying facing the wall. I felt with my back that someone was behind me, and to make sure, I turned around. Before my eyes, a silhouette started to fade away. I looked at the clock, and it showed 1 a.m. So as my nephew said in the dream, the uncle was supposed to come at 1 a.m., and he did. I lay there realizing that something had happened. I couldn't fall asleep until morning, and when the phone rang early in the morning, I already knew the news wouldn't be good. And that's exactly what happened. My grandmother passed away during the night. She was 97 years old. It turns out my uncle came for her. 6 months before that, I had another dream about my uncle. He was standing by a huge calendar, crossing out dates. I asked him what he was doing, and he said he was waiting for his mom, my grandmother, to come live with him. I asked how soon she would move in with him, and he replied that it wouldn't take long, that she would move before the next year. And that's exactly what happened. My grandmother passed away on New Year's Eve. It happened to my older brother when he was about 4 years old. One day, my mom took him to the park, but my brother flatly refused to get out of the car. When my mom asked him why he wouldn't get out, my brother pointed to a tree stump near the road and said that there was a boy sitting there, staring at him. My brother was very scared because of this. Later, my mom went to the local library and started looking through newspapers for incidents related to that place. She found a note about how, in 1940, a father and his young son were playing hide-and-seek in that park, and the boy disappeared without a trace. A thorough search didn't yield any results. Many years later, old trees were being cut down in the park, and inside one of the trees, the skeleton of a boy was found. It's likely that he hid inside the hollow of the tree and couldn't get out. This was exactly the spot where my brother had seen the boy's ghost. My brother is 28 years old now, but he still remembers this incident and is still frightened by it. September, and I was working as a janitor in a hospital morgue. I had already gotten used to this kind of environment, and it didn't bother me. But that time, it was 2 a.m., and I had already worked past my shift. However, I was told I wouldn't be allowed to go home until I cleaned the floors in the morgue. When I took the elevator down to the morgue in the basement, it was gloomy and dark, and I immediately felt uneasy. Still, I turned on the lights and started getting cleaning supplies from the cabinet. Then I stepped out of the room for just a few seconds, and when I came back, the lights were off. I decided it was probably an electrical issue, mostly just to calm myself down. Then I started mopping the floors, and suddenly I heard a sound, like one of the refrigerator doors opening. I froze and asked out loud, "Is someone there?" No one answered. I was scared but continued my work. Then the phone on the desk rang loudly. I picked it up, and it was a doctor who told me something terrifying. "We made a terrible mistake. Check one of the drawers immediately. Someone might still be alive and just in a coma." I told the doctor to stay on the line and went to the refrigerators, heading to the area where I had heard the sound earlier. As soon as I opened the door to one of the drawers, a woman jumped out and screamed louder than anything I had ever heard before. She had light hair and was wearing jeans and a tank top. I stepped back from her, and she yelled, "How do I get out of here?" Shaking, I pointed her toward the elevator, and she ran out of the morgue as fast as she could. I'd always dreamed of staying home alone for at least one night in my life. Such an opportunity had presented itself a long time ago when my parents went to another city, but back then they sent me to my grandfather's village, which was very disappointing. Finally, one day my mom and dad had to leave for the countryside for a day. Dad could have gone alone, but he needed help. I was left home because I had a lot of homework to do. So they reminded me of all the safety rules, left the fridge full of food, told me to finish all my homework, which they promised to check, and instructed me not to go to bed too late. Early in the morning, my parents left, and as soon as I came home from school, I was looking forward to a great day. Strangely enough, given my personality, I finished all my homework completely. Luckily, it was easy, and then I took a nap so I wouldn't collapse from exhaustion later at night. In my sleep, I heard some muffled thuds, as if they were happening somewhere in my apartment. But being half asleep, I didn't pay much attention to it and quickly forgot about it. I woke up around 8 p.m., ate, and finally sat down at my computer. Gradually, time crept up to 11 p.m. I decided that was enough for the day and decided to go to bed. I turned off the computer, brushed my teeth, and finally came to the scariest part: walking to the bed in complete darkness. I'd always had problems with this before, with the main problem being fear. Darkness affects most people in a similar way. But finally, I made it to my bed, tucked myself in comfortably, and stretched out. I felt satisfied with myself for finally being able to spend some quality time at the computer. I lay there happy for about 10 to 15 minutes, long enough for my eyes to adjust to the darkness. Then I closed my eyes for the first time, yawned sweetly, and fell asleep. But only for a few minutes. Through my sleep, I heard a loud crashing sound. It was similar to what I had dreamed earlier during the day, but 5 to 6 times louder and stronger. It felt like I was doused with boiling water. I opened my eyes in horror. That was the only thing I could manage to do. I was terrified, utterly petrified, unable to move, just lying there with my eyes open, fully aware of everything around me. From the kitchen, the sound was definitely coming from there. Something else fell, and with every crash of falling dishes, it felt like needles were piercing my back, making me jump in fear. I lay there for 30 to 40 minutes, not blinking once, facing the wall with my eyes shut tight, and then things got even worse. At first I thought it was over, but then I heard some kind of jumping or loud footsteps. Something was brazenly hopping around in my kitchen, throwing everything in its path. Then, a giant leap, and it was in the hallway, just 2 steps away from my room. I should have never gone to bed and turned off the lights, I whispered to myself. Suddenly, another wave of shock and fear washed over me. I could feel it, clear as day, standing right in the doorway of my room, staring at me. You don't need to guess. Your brain sends a clear signal to your body that something is there. At that moment, I thought of my parents and how I might never see them again. I lay there feeling that horrible stare on me for another 30 minutes. Then came rapid movement around the apartment and the terrifying sound of a window being smashed. Whatever it was so strong that it ripped the window frame out as if it were made of cardboard. At that point, my body completely gave out, and I passed out from exhaustion. I woke up around 9 a.m. when everything was quiet. There was a joyful feeling in my chest as if it was finally over. That feeling came on its own. I didn't even want to look at what had happened in the kitchen, but I had to. Oh my God, I thought to myself, this wasn't a dream. The entire kitchen was a mess. All the dishes were scattered everywhere, and I'd say 95% of them were broken. And the window? Well, what can I say? There was a square hole in the wall, as if the window had never been there. I looked down and saw our window lying on top of our neighbor's car. The same neighbors we often had arguments with. Well, I thought, the most important thing is that I'm still alive. An hour later, my parents arrived, and they were even more shocked than I was. Naturally, they didn't believe me and just said that I was worse than a little child and that I was an absolute idiot. It hurt so much that I wanted to cry, being almost killed in the middle of the night, but of course, no one believes you. We replaced the window with a new one, this time a plastic one. We also paid for the neighbor's car repairs. But that wasn't the most important thing. I kept wondering why it didn't kill me that night and instead just stood there staring at me. Could it have been some kind of test? In any case, I'm just glad that I'm still alive.